It's a big issue facing thousands of Australians, housing affordability and access to homes for first home buyers. To try and address the issue using its already successful home guarantee scheme, the Morrison government announced changes including lifting the price cap to get into the scheme, specifically targeting first home buyers, regional buyers and single parents. To explain how it'll all work, joining me now, Assistant Minister for Housing Michael Sukkar, coming to us now from Melbourne. Minister, raising the price cap, how will that work and what's it mean for younger Australians trying to get a foot on the property ladder?
Well, good to be with you, Peter. This is an expansion of an already very successful program, one that has seen more than 60,000 Australians get into a new home. We do annually increase the house price caps under the home guarantee scheme, and what we announced this week was the next round of increases for the following financial year, which, for example, has seen house price cap increases in our major capital cities of about 100,000 and in regional areas an increase of 150,000. In essence, the program allows people to purchase a home with a 5% deposit as opposed to the full 20% deposit that banks are increasingly requiring. We've also expanded it to single parents who can purchase a home with a 2% deposit. And so as part of the expansion of the scheme, which we announced in the budget, increasing it to 50,000 places per annum, it made absolute sense not only to acknowledge the house price increases that we've seen over the last 12 months, but also an acknowledgement that more families are actually using the home guarantee scheme than we probably originally envisaged. And that obviously requires larger homes and therefore requires higher caps. So really, we can't afford to wave the white flag on home ownership in this country. It's a cornerstone of, I think, our ethos as Australians. As part of the home guarantee scheme and home builder program and first home super saver scheme that we've put in place in this term of parliament, we've seen first home buyers at their highest levels for nearly 15 years, which you wouldn't expect to see with the rises in house prices that we have seen. And so we think this extraordinarily successful scheme can do even more in providing that leg up for first home buyers. And that's really what's dictated the increase in house price caps that we announced this week.
Your Labor critics say this is just a policy that increases the cost of housing, but what's their alternative?
Well, Labor don't have any policies on housing. That's the reality. So Labor's a vacant space on housing. What we have seen and what this program does ensure is that it just gives people that ability to borrow where they wouldn't otherwise be able to, in the sense that they save a 5% deposit as opposed to a 20% deposit. That cuts years of time off the period in which you need to save. The banks are still ultimately lending to these first home buyers or single parents. And so the banks are undertaking credit assessments and credit checks and making sure that these are people who are able to service the loan. So it doesn't distort the market in that sense. It just brings forward that purchase because we know for first home buyers in particular, the hurdle to purchasing a home is getting that deposit together. And by reducing that deposit from 20% to 5%, we have seen more than 60,000 people get into a home. And Peter, interestingly, we have not seen one default under this scheme in the first 3 years. So what that shows is we've got a cohort of buyers who are really solid buyers, who are people that, the banks are well placed in putting their faith in, and we're well placed in guaranteeing their first home.
That is very impressive, Minister. Let's move to another issue. It's dominated news today. It's all around the Liberal candidate for the New South Wales seat of Warringah. Here's a pretty fired up Ben Fordham on Sydney radio this morning.
All of our listeners are talking about Catherine Deves. They're all saying we love Catherine Deves. Catherine Deves has got nothing to apologise for. Catherine Deves for Prime Minister. But Matt Keane doesn't want to say Catherine Deves. She says, I'm not going anywhere. Good. She is an incredibly tough woman. And let me put this to Zali Steggall. Is the prominent trans woman Caitlyn Jenner transphobic? Because Caitlyn Jenner says we have to protect girls and women in sport. It is simply unfair if they have to race against biological men. So is Caitlyn Jenner, the most high-profile transgender figure on planet Earth, transphobic? Apparently, according to Zali. Zali Steggall is off with the fairies.
Minister, when did defending the rights of women and girls to get a fair go in sport become an issue that's got Liberals like Matt Keane out there running Labor lines?
Well, Peter, I mean, all I can do is reiterate, my views. I think Catherine is obviously a very courageous woman to take up this fight in what is a very contentious area. Is something that shows she's courageous. And I think if we boil it down to the fundamental campaign that Catherine has so successfully fought for is the rights of women and girls in sport and the rights of particularly girls and women to be able to play in single-sex sport. And I would have thought that's a campaign that we can all, to some extent, agree on. And the fact that she's shown so much courage is something to be commended. Sure, she's apologised for comments that she now regrets, and she wouldn't be the first political aspirant to have apologised for things said in the past. I think the reality is we're very fortunate to have someone with her courage standing up, quite frankly, Peter, for mainstream values. I think the vast majority of Australians out there would say, absolutely, we support single-sex sport. We support women and girls playing in sport against other biological women and girls. Doesn't seem to be a particularly controversial position. But like so many of these debates, Peter, when you can't win the debate itself, you attack the person and try to almost send a message to everybody else. Don't take on this fight. And I think, sadly, that's what's happened to Catherine. And I commend her for having the courage to stand up.
Michael Sukkar, Minister there for Housing, thank you for your time.